Haggai or Haggai points to problems most people face today. He whose name was festive or celebration points to problems. And the number one problem that he points to is a failure on God's people's behalf to make the main thing their main thing, to set their priorities. And their priority must be to respond to God's promises with obedience, aligning themselves with the will of God. Now, this is what the Lord Almighty says: give careful thought to your ways. It is you who have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. It's time for God's people to be countercultural and not follow the pattern of the world. Haggai points to the fact that God's people need to reject any defeated or victim mentality. Is it time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? Can you really live with yourselves? In other words, you're doing quite well, yet you're leaving the main thing out, giving God your priority, rebuilding the house of God. He brought you out of slavery. Isn't it time now to put Him first? Then Haggai calls God's people to confess their need of Him, to turn away from this independent lifestyle. And lastly, Haggai calls for a confession and professing trust in God's power. Time to confess or to profess trust in God's power, in God's plan, and in God's age-old promise. For God says, the glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house, says the Lord Almighty. And in this place I'll grant peace, declares the Lord Almighty. When you look at God, when you listen to God, when you look back at what He's done in the past, you know that the outcome is inevitable. God's power, God's resolve, God's plan, and God's promise will come to fruition. But it is time for God's people to put God absolutely first.